All right. Diane, Michael, you let people in, please. All righty. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nidbarei.
Amen. Amen.
Chaim l'chaim v'bracha. Shavua tov, hagetovach. Welcome, folks. Start a new week. We get new life. New life, and where's the life come from? From the parsha of the week, of course. As we live with the times, it gives us life. So one of the things that we learn in Tanya, that life is a battle. And the battle is not from without, but from within. And if you engage in the battle, ultimately, you're going to win the war. Ultimately, you're going to win the war. So how is it that you win the war? What's the guarantee that you're going to win the war? That whatever that war might be, challenge at work, family life, or the war in Israel. A certain way, in a certain manner, it's all the same battle. How do we ascertain victory? So, of course, we have 53 chapters of the Tanya that the author wrote for us and gave us the internalized way, the long way that's short, the short way that's long. Today, we're just going to go through an idea that maybe, well, an idea for them. We'll connect it. All right. So this week's Torah portion picks up, of course, from last week in the fact that Yosef in last week's parsha became the viceroy over Egypt. He is dealing very effectively with the famine. All other nations are in a state of peril, which of course includes Yaakov and his family in Canaan. And they need to come down to Egypt for provisions. Brothers do. They come right in front of Yosef. They don't recognize Yosef because Yosef was sold when he was only 17. He was fully mature, so now he is with a full beard, and they don't recognize him. And Yosef is being tough with them. Tough with them because to gauge, have they done proper tshuva for what they had done previously? And at this point, where he says to them, bring down your youngest brother, Benjamin, which is his brother. A whole story of course, false accusations that he stole the goblet from Yosef's home, and he is being incarcerated. Yosef says, the rest of you are free. He'll be my slave. He's the one who was caught with the goblet. He will be my slave. That's where we pick up from the end of last week. So the parsha begins, very opening lines. Very opening lines. Oops. Oh. And I lost it. Excuse me a moment. You make the wrong click, especially when you don't see because it's covered over. Guess what happens? You lose it. All right, there we go. Do you see it in front of you? Text 1A?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Vayigash elav Yehuda. Vayigash, and he approached to him, to Yosef, Yehuda. Right? In English, you see how it's the opposite, right? Vayomer. And he says, who says? Yehuda's now speaking to Yosef. Judah to Joseph, right? Biadeni, please, my master. Yidaber no ba'avdecha. Allow your servant to speak a matter. Ba'azne adoni. In the ear of, or the ears of my master. Ba'al yichar abcha, the avdecha. And let not be kindled your wrath against your servant. He because you are like Pharaoh. Okay? So Rashi has a difficulty over here. What's his difficulty? We have right here. And Yehuda approached Yosef. And with the words, together with the words, a matter into my master's ears. And Rashi says, that may my words enter your ears. That's it. Rashi's bothered by the words, may say something into my master's ears, right? And he says, Judah approached Yosef, a matter into my master's ears. And he adds, may my words enter your ears. So what's bothering Rashi? So at first glance, it seems that the phrase, speak a matter into the ears, it's an unusual term and needs some clarification. What does it mean? To speak a matter into the ears, right? And Rashi's coming to therefore explain what those words mean. Now, before we get into that, if the issue is those words are the challenge, those very words, then we have another problem. Remember, we have many principles, many rules in Rashi. And one of the rules is that if there's a phrase that is uncommon and it needs an explanation, Rashi will explain it at the very first instance that it comes up. He's not going to wait. I'm going to wait to explain it. He's going to explain it right away. Well, if that's the case, then we have a bit of a problem. Why? Because we're at the end of the book of Bereshis, and near the beginning of the book, we already have Avimelech, the king of the Philistines. He talks to his servants. And guess what term he uses? And Avimelech arose in the morning and summoned his servants and spoke all of these words into their ears. Again, the same term. He spoke into their ears. Right? Rashi doesn't explain over there what that term means. Not only that, but right after that, we also have it when Avraham is looking in Parshas Chayei Sarah for a burial plot for Sarah. Sarah passes away. He wants to purchase a burial plot from Ephron the Chiti in Hebron. And we have a few times that the term is used again, Ba'azne, again over there. And he spoke to Ephron in the ears of the people of the land. So there were actually, in that occasion, there was back and forth on both sides. Avram speaking in the ears, Ephron is speaking in the ears, everybody's speaking in the ears, right? And Rashi doesn't explain over there what that phrase means, right? So the obvious answer is that there's not an issue over there. Here, there is an issue. And that's why Rashi's explaining here. But what's the issue over here and not over there if it's the unusual term? Another question that we have, another rule of Rashi. Rashi, when he quotes from the verse in the Torah, right, that's also something to be very precise, very exacting upon. All right, let's go back for a moment. So he quotes from V'yigash Elav, and Judah approached him, and Davar ba'aznei adoni, speak a matter into my master's ears, right? So there's a problem over here. Why are you bringing down that he approached, that Yehuda approached Yosef? If the issue is, what does these words, Davar ba'aznei adoni, mean, right? That's the issue at hand. Well, that's what he's coming to explain. Yikansu dvarai ba'aznechem, may my words enter your ears. So then just quote those words. And why are you quoting the beginning of the verse that he approached him? You're not explaining that. We have a principle that there's a very, Rashi's is explaining exactly what his question is. Seemingly his question, at first glance, we understand that what his question is not unusual terminology. Is that clear, the question? Those two questions, yeah? We're good? Any more thumbs up? Oh, okay, good, excellent. Okay. Now, all phrases, all terms that we use in any kind of speaking, any kind of language, any kind of communication, they don't make sense if they are standing alone. You need to consider their context. Right? When I teach Chumash and Rashi every morning, I give you the literal translation of a word because I want you to understand the literal meaning, and then we see it in context the way it's translated, but it's related to the literal meaning. We had today, and I'm trying to remember. But often we have. And of course, we need to understand everything in its context. So a phrase in our parsha has one context. In the parsha of Avimelech and Ephraim, where Avram is engaged with Avimelech and he's engaged with Ephraim, it's a different context. So we need to take those contexts into consideration. So in the previous two, with Abraham, with Avram, the speaker is addressing a crowd. So, crowd is being addressed. So it's more common that, you want to get the attention of everybody. So you're speaking into their ears to gain their attention. Right. So we have, in the case of Avimelech, Avimelech was addressing, plural group, his servants. That's what that he was saying. And even in the case of Avram, that he was speaking to Ephraim, but there was a whole town that was there, or a good part of the town, and he wanted to draw their attention. So therefore, he's speaking about in the ears of, right? But in our context, it's different. It's the first time that the Torah is using this phrase in a one-on-one conversation. Yehuda is addressing Yosef. It's in front of all of his brothers, but he's not speaking to his brothers. He's speaking specifically to Yosef. That's his target. And he's actually deliberately leaving his brothers behind. That's why it says, Vayigash Elav, right? Rashi quotes from the verse, and Yehuda approached Yosef. He approached him. It could have said that he just spoke to him. Why does it say that he approached him? It's because he wanted to speak directly and specifically to him, not to a crowd. When you speak to a crowd, it's a message for a crowd. Here, he doesn't want a message for a crowd. He wants a message to one person. Now, as we'll see in the next reading from the Orach Chaim, that this was, somewhat of so what I'm looking for, of a challenge, of an obstacle in a certain way, because who's Yehuda talking to? I mean, he doesn't know that it's his brother, of course, right? Who's he talking to? The viceroy of Egypt, second in command. There's only one person that has any more power than him, and that's Pharaoh. Whoa, right? So what does that mean? So the Orach Chaim explains, we need to clarify, why does the Torah tell us Yehuda approached Yosef if he was already in close proximity to him, considering that they had already been conversing, right? They're already talking. So it's well known that kings are customarily accompanied by their high-ranking courtiers, ministers, and advisors. When people are granted an audience with a king, they are not invited to advance past the high-ranking ministers and stand directly before the king. Rather, they stand beyond the circle of the royal advisors and address the king from there. This is how you addressed Yosef until this point, from a distance. Now, he wasn't the king, but he is second in command, so he does have an entourage. He does have people around him, right? His, bodyguards, if you will. Not really, but. Then he approached Yosef, meaning he stepped past his station and stood between the king and his ministers so that only the king would hear his words. Yehuda, his words were rather pointed. They would be strong words, and therefore in a public setting, not something to be said. So Vayigash, he approached him. He spoke quietly, but forcefully and strongly, defiantly even. Is that clear? With this, now we answer two of our questions. The opening words was, and Yehuda approached him. Well, that had to be in Rashi's in Rashi's comment that he's giving. That was necessary that he quotes that, because that's to prove that this is a unique conversation. It's not for the public. It's only for one person to hear, Yosef. So that therefore explains to us how this is different than any of the other two instances that we had with Avram and Parshas Vayera and in Parshas Chayesara. Right? In the other instances, there's a public, statements that are being made that might be more for one person, but it was meant for the public to hear, right? So in our instance, now we have, with this one answer, we have our two questions dealt with. So why did Rashi use this in the header? And why does Rashi not explain this previously? So the answer is that there's an urgency in what Yehuda has to share with Yosef, and that Yosef needs to pay close attention. May my words enter your ears. Now, don't listen to this superficially, what I'm about to say to you. Don't try to argue or disprove what I'm saying. He's not saying these things. Yehuda is not saying these things, but he's approaching the matter in this way. Open up your mind and heart. Yeah, Mr. Second in Command, Viceroy. Give full attention, right? Be an active listener. Listen well. Let your servant speak a matter in your ears of my master. So when we read Rashi's words again, let my words enter your ears. In other words, let my words penetrate well into you. That this message has to penetrate into your mind and into your heart. In English, maybe we would say, please consider this very, very well, what I'm about to say to you, right? In Yiddish, we use a different term. There's der Herr und der Herren. Herren, which means to hear, und der Herren, which is a deep, grasp and understanding. Previous Rebbe tells us. Okay. A chassid is very familiar with what we mean when we say deheren. We want to discuss the difference between deheren and deheren at length. Heron doesn't mean listening only with one's ears. Listening with one's ears is not really listening. It goes in one ear and out the other. Heron is like the phrase, for your servant is listening. The meaning of listening is to understand. The brain listens and the intellect listens. It is like the phrase, the ear examines words to understand what we hear. The heron is very different. It is when we are listening, ear carries the insight to literally every organ in the body. Yehuda wants Yosef to give his words a chance to really hear what he is about to share with him. Now, this was not the style of any royalty to do such a thing. Remember, he is the viceroy of Egypt. Yosef would think immediately, if he's going to say something that's going to be forceful, that's going to be impactful, naturally, what would a person in his position react? Not well. Kind of emotion, who are you speaking like that to? Who do you think you are? Right? So therefore, before he begins, Vayigash Yehuda, he comes close and he says to him, very I don't know if stern is the right word, not stern, very, very clear, matter of fact, strong, before he says what he's going to say, right? And as he says at the end of the verse, right, that we are, what does he say? And let your wrath not be kindled. At the end of the verse, it said, don't let, your wrath shouldn't be kindled. From here, we discern that Yehuda spoke forcefully to Yosef. Do we have the Rashi? Is it clear? So now we understand Rashi. Rashi's coming to say that Yehuda came forward in a manner that if he spoke this way publicly, would not be appropriate. But yet he had to say something, and he has to say it with strength, with a forcefulness. He's got to do that. So much so he says, don't let this kindle your wrath against your servant. And therefore, he has to quote, and that Yehuda approached, because that was the whole point. He had to say something very strong to him. And therefore, let this enter into your ears, that you should hear the heron, that it should take you over every limb of your body, not just, hear a message and then in one ear and out the next, or that it doesn't, truly touch you. That's how he speaks. But this raises another question then. Okay, we get that's what Rashi is saying. Fine. But that itself is problematic. Again, this is Yehuda speaking to Yosef, the viceroy of Egypt. Shouldn't you speak to him more softly, more respectfully? Not, no, he did. It's not that he didn't speak to him respectfully. I don't want. It shouldn't be thought that way. But it shouldn't be more with greater respect, shall we say? More, if you will, forbearance, patience. Wouldn't that be more effective? All right. So to answer this question, we're good. Everybody's here. Everybody accounted for. All right. Mm. I'm very blessed. I have my daughter and son-in-law and their 4 kids from Atlanta. Daughter Mishki's here. And we have a 2-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old. So 2-year-old the other day, it was on Shabbos actually. Wanted a jelly donut. After all, it's Hanukkah. Didn't just want the jelly donut. Like was very strong-minded about it. A little tantrum to boot, right? When you want when you want a raise from your boss, you usually don't go in and make a tantrum, right? You go and you speak to them, how nice it is to be working in this company and so on. And I've been here for a while, that, my family's growing. I need a raise. You speak in a gentle way, right? Why doesn't the child speak in a gentle way? Now, of course, they're immature. Get that. Right. But putting that aside, how's the child looking at that jelly donut? Anybody? Does anybody remember the child in them?
He just
Who can
wants it.
explain this to me? Not all at once. Kim, explain to me, why is the child making the tantrum? Why is the child acting in this manner? Wendy, Chava,
Because he wanted that donut now.
exactly why does a child want the donut now?
That's the only thing they're thinking about. It's like everything to them.
Ah, it's existential to them.
Yes.
It's like life and death almost, you know? It's like life and death. That's where the immaturity comes in, right? It's not life and death, but they feel it, that it's an existential threat to their existence or I don't know, threat to their existence might be the right word, but an existential need. When you come into your boss and you ask him for a raise and it's only going to be an 8% raise, okay, you need that, but it's not an existential threat to your existence if you don't get the raise. It just might mean that you're going to go on a less of a vacation, or you may not get the car that you wanted to buy, right? It might mean that. But it's not an existential issue. For the child, for that jelly donut, it is. Again, immaturely so, but that's not the point, right? Have you had something in your life that you felt that it was a question of your existence was on the line, or something that was an existential issue for you that you felt that, hey, I can't cross this line. This is a, you know, a non-issue. So what happens when you do that? Well, in a way like the child, except you do it as an adult, you put aside all of the political niceties, not because you're stubborn, not because I'm willful, not because of that. That's a different issue. That's the child who's stubborn and willful, immaturely so for the donut. But if you have something in your life that is a matter of existential value, how do you react? You react in an absolute resolve that there is no crossing this line, period, whatever it might be. And if the answer is no, it's with a capital N and with a capital O. If that's what the issue at hand, then you need to say no. The same applied to Yehuda. He wasn't discussing about, let's make a payment plan over here on how we can, get him out early. And they couldn't agree on the payment plan. This was an existential threat to his brother. And not just to his brother. Who else? His father. So there was a sense of urgency. There is no conciliation here. Let's see, there are his words on this in this week's Sikha. So long as we are dealing with shallow concerns, monetary profits, and the like, we approach a matter rationally and determine the most effective way to address it. When we deal with a matter that his soul is tied up in his soul, his father's soul is tied up in Binyamin's soul, something that endangers the lives of Binyamin and his aged father Yaakov, we don't make rational determinations about the best approach. We begin by making a tumult. As the saying goes, and one screams when it hurts. by the way. I scream, you scream. We all scream for ice cream. When you were a kid, right? You scream for ice cream because it hurts if you don't get it. That's the child. That's the immaturity of, right? But the point is when it hurts, you scream. Okay, now Yehuda didn't scream. He didn't shout, but he conveyed a point of urgency here. There's an important matter that is happening right now. And you know what that important matter is? You've got my brother in captivity. So he's speaking, not with disrespect, but he's not speaking in a manner that there's a room for negotiation here. Therefore, he comes across strong and forceful. He's not offensive. He's not insulting. But there's lives on the lives at stake over here. Literally lives at stake. Binyamin's life, and as a result, their father's life, who's old and frail. So when he approaches, when Yehuda approaches Yosef, it's with a sense of conveying an urgency that he's going to speak strongly, not offensive, but he's conveying a sense of urgency. And he says, please be open to my message. The Rebbe continues in the Sikha, and these matter strong words convince the listener that the matter is truly existential. We are not concerned with money, prestige, power, and the like. It's not about me getting my way or the highway. That's not conveying an urgency. That's not conveying an existential matter that is of utmost importance. That's my way. That's power. That's not what was at stake for Yehuda. This approach results in, may my words enter your ears. When we begin with a tumult, right? Because he started with a tumult. Now, what was a tumult? He's standing away from him, speaking, but at a distance. Now he approaches. That itself is not the norm. You don't do that. But he's doing it with such an authenticity, with such a sense of there's an urgency in the matter that, no one's saying off with his head. This approach results in, may my words enter your ears when we begin with the tumult, a bang on the table, diplomatic niceties. Others realize that this is truly an existential matter for us. This convinces them to concede and grant our demands. Eventually, they come around to our perspective and grant it happily and willingly. Wow. How many times did this happen? We're now in the holiday of Hanukkah. How many times did it happen that the city didn't want to have menorahs up, or the Jewish community fought against Chabad, that we shouldn't have menorahs, separation of church and state? This is inappropriate. Who knows what this will bring? Maybe to, modern day crusades, if we allow the menorah. The Chabad? No. This is existential. The menorah must be out there. The statement must be made. We don't take no for an answer. And then finally, Went to the Supreme Court, and we won. I was in Pittsburgh in, I don't know, 19, I don't know, the 80s. Likewise, when you're dealing with a fellow Jew or another human being, and what you believe is that this mitzvah is crucial for you to fulfill, to put on tefillin. And we told the story, it was last week actually, maybe the week before, I don't remember now. Someone was at the kotel. He's approached, come do a mitzvah, put on tefillin, speak to him. And he says, no. Later on, he sees it. He puts on tefillin, he comes to him and says, well, you talk to me. It sounded like you were just looking for some brownie points for yourself that I should do the mitzvah. Right? If it's brownie points, okay. Then it's like, it's transactional. If it's transactional, so then we can discuss it and we could debate it and, but when this Chabadnik approached me and asked me to put on tefillin, it was like, I must, because I must. Because that's what a Jew has to do, especially if you're here at the Holy Western Wall. So it was an existential matter, how crucial and important this was, not for a transactional gain in your life, but for me, he felt. I'm adding to the words what this person said, actually, but, just to give more clarity. Likewise, when it comes to raising children or dealing with anybody in any matter, whatever it might be. What Yehuda teaches us over here is that we have to be confident, we have to be assertive, we have to do it in a nice way. He did not demean Yosef publicly. He went over and said to him privately, yes, in his forceful, strong terms, but it was about the matter at hand. It wasn't about him. So when you keep your eye on the goal, you won't be insulting, but you're going to make your point very loud and clear that it will enter into the ears and it will be understood by the mind, felt in the heart of the individual. So we want to have chutzpah to speak the truth, but we want to make sure that when we speak, we don't do it with chutzpah. When you are conveying values to others, that's very important. It's done in such a manner, even to children, that they need to see that it's authentic, it's real. There's a line that you don't cross. There is compromise. There's nothing to compromise here. Kosher is kosher. So when you raise your child and you tell them, oh, you can't have it, it's not kosher, there's not an issue for them. Many years ago, we had a fine family reunion in somewhere outside of Toronto. And we're talking, it's over 30 years ago. Yeah, I think it's over 30 years ago. Or maybe just 29 years ago this past summer, maybe. To double check. And so we were the only people that came to the Fine Family reunion that was kosher. But they were respectful. I always had different competition for the kids. And my kids won all the competitions against the other kids. Even though religious kids, they won the competitions. And then they had like this big basket full of goodies, potato chips, little bags, all that, Chazarai, Nasharai food, right? And they open up and they take a look and they look. You see that it didn't have a hechsher on it. It wasn't kosher. So they said, no, thank you. And we're talking, I think my kids are, I don't know, I think they were 12, 10. Boys were 12, 10, 8, and 6. Yeah. 4 boys in a row. I think that's something like that. People were blown away. How could you do that? I mean, like it's, the jelly donut making tantrum for, right? Because there's a line in the sand that it's not a question, it's not an issue. It's a non-starter because it was conveyed to them in a loving manner. But if it's not kosher, it's not negotiable. Once kosher is negotiable, so then, you keep on moving the marker. If it's not negotiable, it's simple. It's not negotiable. For Yehuda, not having Binyamin back was not negotiable. That's where his headspace was. That's where his heart was. So he didn't make a tantrum, but he dealt with it in that manner. Therefore, he approaches Yosef in a strong worded manner and saying, don't be angry. I'm going to say some truths here. And then we learn from him of what it means to be a true leader, what it means to be a leader of a household, what it means to be a teacher as a leader, what it means any human engagement that we have where there's an issue at hand that is existential matter. We need to put a line in the sand, put all, political niceties aside. And if the only way is to speak strongly, so we do it. Not in a chutzpahdik way, and not with your child in a harsh manner, loving, but in a clear that it is not negotiable. Certain things are just not negotiable. Now, the better the parent you would be, the more things you can make that are not non-negotiable with the child, right? Certain things, well, it could be. I'm not saying everything's not negotiable, but that your child is not having a snack before dinner. For some parents, they make excuses for themselves because it's easy to be lazy. It's easy to to give in when they're kvetching. It's harder to stay strong. But the more there are things that are not negotiable, right? Again, within reason, not everything is that way and so on. But done in a loving way to the child, the stronger those boundaries are, the better that child will be raised. Now, often it can be, a fight against of wills and who's more stubborn. If that's the case, then it becomes an emotional issue of the parent rather than a existential moral issue. When it's framed that way, that's the key. And that's how you win the war of life. The more things are existential for you. So the Beinoni, what's existential for the Beinoni? Everything. Is this connecting me to God or disconnecting me from God? If it's connecting me to God, good. Not, then that's existential, how the Beinoni sees it, right? And therefore, now, it might not always be clear. That's true. In Yehuda's instance, it was very clear. His soul, Binyamin's soul, is bound up with his father's soul. There are two souls at risk over here. So it's very clear. Not always in our lives will be that way. In a way, for the Beinoni, it is that way. Because it comes down that my soul is bound up in this. Now, that's a very high-minded way to live as the Beinoni, but as BIT's Beinoni in training, that is how we, we come to take this lesson. And the more we see that whatever we're dealing with is existential. So imagine you have, a Jew in front of you to put on tefillin with them, to help them do a mitzvah. And you can look at it, a nice thing. And if not, okay, so a mitzvah wasn't done. All right, I even missed an opportunity to do good for another Jew and trying to bring him closer. Maybe that mitzvah will lead him to another mitzvah, If you look at, though, that putting on tefillin with that Jew, right, is a bond with God in the moment that brings a new light into this world, period. And maybe that light is a tipping scale for redemption. It becomes an existential matter. It doesn't become just merely a nice, good thing to do. That's very powerful. It becomes a must. And therefore, you find the words to speak to that person in a manner that conveys to them that this mitzvah is an existential matter. That's not so easy. But it's the truth. It is the truth. Now, for Yehuda, it was much easier to feel that truth and to know that truth because, Binyamin is incarcerated. And he knows the effect that would have on his father. His father clearly told him. He's fully aware of it. So it's much more real. But the lesson for us doesn't mean that this is not real either. It is. Especially from, knowing the Rebbe's teachings and how the Rebbe sees and feels about this and teaches about this and how the reality is as this. And finally, when it comes to the Holy Land of Israel, how are we going to win the war? When we play no more politics. When the leaders recognize that's an existential matter, and here it's an existential threat to the security, to the lives of millions of people, not just a brother and a father. For that alone, Yehuda took total responsibility, total engagement, ready to put everything on the line. All the more so when it comes to millions of people, that their security is crucial. And the only way you're going to get the message across to any of the other leaders is not because you're playing politics, not because you are playing, whose willpower will be stronger. No. When you realize the severity of the issue, when you realize the importance of the security of millions of people, that's a very strong and responsible place to be. How else would you talk but with that sense of authority? If you have that position of authority, that you will speak not disrespectfully, not angrily, but in a sense that my words should be heard in your ears, that will go from head to toe, that you get the message clearly, that this is the reality, this is the truth, and it's not up for discussion. It's not for debate. If you've seen me, I've done on YouTube many reaction videos. Please make sure you become a subscriber to my YouTube station, Tanya Rabbi, and send it to others. So I made this comment, actually, of a debate about Israel. This is not good because of the lies and everything, and the warping of things, and it just and usually those who defend Israel are not necessarily coming from a sense of existential issue that's at hand. And therefore, they speak about it in a political manner. When the Rebbe spoke, he didn't speak because he was stubborn, because he was strong-minded. But we can't compromise on vital issues. There's no compromise. When we approach the world that way, including America, we stand firmly because it's about our survival, and with unapologetic, slowly but surely, that message will be heard and people will hear. When you start to compromise, when you start to make even just discussions, I remember very clearly in the Madrid, when Shamir, Yitzhak Shamir, the Prime Minister of Israel, was in 91, I think. It was in 1991, if I recall correctly. The Madrid summit. This is before Oslo. This is what led to Oslo. The Rebbe said he's going to bring down the government, which he actually did, because there was one vote, and that was a chassid of the Rebbe, and he voted against the government, brought down the government. I said, why? Because just talking, going to Madrid to talk, just to talk, is already compromise. With evil, you don't talk. There's nothing, no conversation. All there is say your truth, say your deal, and the rest, the words will enter into the ears and have its effect. There's no doubt in my mind that that is the path for us to win. Chaim. As it is on a individual basis, so it is on a collective basis. Any questions? Any comments? Nothing. Clear, I hope. Yeah. Powerful. Very powerful. Very powerful.
This is Elise.
Well, I see some people just came in now. Feel bad that you came in now, not earlier, but can always get the reruns.
I agree with you on this.
Always get the reruns. It's up right after this. So that's the story, folks. All right. Worth listening over again. I might even listen again. I wasn't speaking to you, anybody here. I was speaking to myself. Look at another Jew when you're doing a mitzvah. Actually, even look at your own mitzvah in such a way, even better. If you look at your own mitzvah, your own prayers, that it's your own mitzvah that you do, that it's an existential matter, right? Even simple as giving charity. Now, it's gonna be hard, at least that we know that that's the truth, even though we might not feel it. Every time I give charity, do I feel it's an existential matter? Nice thing. And if I didn't give, okay, I'll give tomorrow, right? I didn't give today, I'll give tomorrow. So in my heart, do I feel it? No, but is there a truth to that? Absolutely. Now, okay, I guess with charity, maybe because didn't give today again. No, with tefillin, no, tefillin are today. You have tomorrow's tefillin? Okay, but tomorrow's tefillin is not today's mitzvah. It's an existential matter. It's not a, right? If we approach life that way, we live a different kind of life. Again, not not to do it in a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Authoritarian, very, holier than thou. No. In a loving way to your fellow Jew when you're doing it, when you're speaking to them in such a way. And in a matter for yourself, for the mitzvah that you're doing, that it's, that doesn't have to express itself in any, harshness. Should be loving even to yourself. All right. Wow. You know what? The class for me came up much better than I expected for myself. I don't know if the rest, well, you didn't know what was coming down the pipe, but it was more than what I had bargained for. All right. TRC coming up. Thank you, folks. A good Nacht. A good Tavach.
Thank you.
Freilich and rest of Hanukkah.
Xag Sameach.